Today I'm doing a review of the Fujifilm XF23mm f2.0. I'll get a couple key specs out of the way regarding this lens. It has 10 elements in 6 groups with 2 aspherical elements. It has an aperture range of f2 to f16. It's just ever so slightly heavier than the 35mm f2.0, coming in at about 180 grams. As far as the compact, weather-resistant prime lenses, I now own the 16mm 2.8, the 35mm f2, the 23mm f2, and the 27mm 2.8, the newest version, the weather-resistant version. They all have a similar quality to them, but each has their own benefits and their own drawbacks as well. So just like when you purchase those lenses, you get in the box a cloth protective bag for the lens, a pouch I should say. You get a small lens hood. It's about that size. It's plastic, not extremely sturdy, but it's still relatively nice. The cool thing about this lens cap is the cool thing about this lens hood, I should say, is that the lens cap can go directly on the hood itself. So yeah, it's kind of another layer of protection where it separates your lens cap from the lens itself, which is kind of nice. But another thing I do with this lens and my 35 f2 is I use this little metal lens hood that I got with one of my per-gear lenses that fits perfectly on these lenses. So let me put the lens cap back on and I'll show you. Oh, actually, I forgot this is a threaded lens cap, or lens hood. So this one's with my this came with my per-gear, but I'm just gonna leave it on there for now. So in terms of the purchasing experience, you get the pouch, the lens hood, and obviously your caps for the lens itself. I got this lens in December, and it was the third lens in this lineup that I've owned. The first one I ever bought was the 35 f2, and I think I've told this story if you watched my videos before. The 35 f2 was my first Fujifilm prime lens, and I think I bought it when I still own the XT100, and I really liked it on that camera. I kept it when I got my XT2. I had the XT2 for a while, and I thought that was a perfect pairing. It was a perfect match. I loved doing street photography with that 35 f2 on the XT2. And then I only sold my XT2 so I could get the XH1 when it was on sale. So the 35 f2 has been like my main go-to lens for photography. And the 16 2.8, although great for photography, up until recently was my main lens for these YouTube videos. But I always had my eye on that 23mm 2.0 because that 35mm equivalent focal length that it works out to be on these crop sensor cameras is a focal length that I've kind of been chasing for a while. Getting a 35mm prime lens on any system is not cheap usually. Obviously, if you're familiar with the Canon system, you watch some of my Canon videos. In terms of the DSLR lineup, you know the nifty 50. You know a little over $100, you can get a really high quality image producing 50mm lens for the Canon system for just over $100. You're good to go. But to get a 35mm focal length, there's a decent jump in price there. But not necessarily with Fuji, because these primes are relatively are priced relatively cheap for what they offer. So I was really excited at that possibility of getting a 35 equivalent f2.0. I was really excited to get it, but it's not the focal length that I learned on. It's not the focal length that I'm most familiar with. But I enjoy it enough, and I see the benefit of that focal length enough that I knew I wanted to get the lens and really practice with it and get good at using that focal length to get the benefits of that slightly wider field of view. So since I got this in December, I've taken it out a decent amount of times. I've probably done maybe not quite a 50-50 rotation between that and the 35 f2, but I have taken it out a lot, and I've been really impressed with the results overall. With doing this review, I wanted to really think about, is there anything unique I can offer you guys information-wise with this lens? And I really don't think there is, because I think there's a ton of reviews on this lens already, and they're all pretty thorough. Each one of them kind of covers a decent amount of photo samples. They talk about the pros and cons and whatever. There's a lot of great reviews on this lens already. I'll repeat some of those points, sure, but I think the best thing I can do is give you my personal experience using it and what it delivers and what maybe it fell short on, if anything. One thing I've done a pretty good job with the past 3 to 4 years is analyzing what photography gear I actually use. And when I reach that point of having a piece of equipment on my shelf sitting for 6 months or longer sometimes without me using it, I know it's probably time that I should start thinking about selling it or donating that piece of kit. So I've done this to a lot of things. I've owned a lot of photo gear over the past few years, and what has allowed me to own a lot is selling one thing to get another thing and keeping the cycle going. It's allowed me to get my hands on a lot of different things I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And it's also inspired me to be a little more disciplined with what I keep. So to find out what's most useful for me to keep, I have to shoot with it for a while and pay attention to, am I liking the results? Am I inspired to go take it out every time I shoot? And just analyze how I use it, really be self-critical with how I use it. We all can fall in love with the idea of a lens or a camera because it sounds great and other people use it and we think, oh, well, it works great for them, it's going to work great for me. But that's not the case. You really have to learn how you shoot, what you like, and really study your own preferences. Learn your creative tendencies, your creative preferences, and then apply that to the gear you get. So I've done a decent job of this. And I've only owned this for 7 months, but I can tell this is a keeper for me, for sure. Like I said, I was excited about the 35mm focal length. For a while, I had a 35 prime on my Canon system. I liked it. My biggest problem with that lens was it's huge, and it didn't inspire me to take it out to do street photography because it was so massive. So when I first got this lens, what inspired me to take it out is obviously the compact size. It's similar size to the 35 f2 and the other lenses in the lineup. So the small sizes of all these lenses is really nice. I like the size of these compact primes. That was one of the first things that inspired me to take it out, because it's small size, easy to take out. The focal length, like I said many times already, the focal length was really important to me. Also inspiring for me. I wanted to go out and try that focal length and try that field of view and see what kind of shots that I can get that I wasn't quite as easy to get with my 53 equivalent on the 35mm. The thing that happened after I started using it for a while was I started to be really impressed with the results, and not even being super critical, and not in terms of I wasn't pixel peeping or doing any of these things. Just looking through my pictures and seeing me framing up some really cool shots and seeing detail in the shots that I just really didn't expect to see. I heard this lens was sharp, but I just didn't really register that it was going to be noticeably sharp or noticeably of high quality. And I had a handful of shots where it really popped out at me, where I said, wow. I mean, a couple of the shots as I was looking through my library, I didn't know I shot with this lens, and I saw this really cool image, and then I looked at the the XF data. I said, oh, that is from the 23 f2. So as I see the results of me shooting with this lens for a while, that inspired me again to take it out more. So it was this cycle that kept fueling itself, which has been really, really cool. So I think my point with all that is that's like my best endorsement for this lens because of the stuff I shoot. As you've seen my stuff, it's, street photography of sorts, but mostly like city scenes and city details and things like this. I love shooting a lot of black and white, and the detail that this gathers is really, really good for dramatic black and white images. I'm not gonna lie, I would love the 23 f1.4. I would love the 35mm f1.4. I do not own either of those lenses right now, but the reality is these compact primes, because they're weather sealed, because of the weight and size that they have, combined with the price, combined with the image quality, it's still such an impressive package for me. And it is the reason why I became a Fuji user, was because of this lens lineup specifically. Again, size, price, build quality, and image quality. That combined is just perfect in this selection of lenses, and this delivers on that. This definitely has all those attributes as well. I think like if someone's watching this saying, asking yourself, should you get this lens? Is this lens for you? And I'll repeat what almost every other person that have done reviews on this lens already said, is that it depends on what you shoot. You really have to analyze what you shoot and what you need. The cool thing about this lens lineup is that there is there's 16mm, 23. I would still count the 27 in there, the 35, and the 50. You have a decent focal range in this compact prime, the sub $500 choices in this lens lineup. You have a decent amount of choices there, and I can vouch for almost all of them. I haven't owned the 50 yet, but I've owned the other ones, and they're all high quality lenses, and they all have their really, really strong points to them. So if you have a kit lens, if you have the 18 to 55, or if you have any of the other variable zoom lenses on any system, but definitely the Fujifilm system, you got to do that thing where you go into Lightroom or whatever photo library system you have, filter out your photos by focal length, and see how many you've taken at 18 millimeters, the widest on that kit lens, or see how many you've taken on the 55 millimeter end of it. See how many pictures you've taken in the middle. Analyze your own library based on the focal length, and you'll start to see some patterns, and you'll give yourself some more information on what lens might be perfect for you. But in terms of this lens, back to this lens specifically, the field of view is perfect for street photography. It is a 35 millimeter equivalent. It's like having a 35 millimeter lens on a film camera or a full frame digital camera, and that's been one of the classic focal lengths for street photography. So it's a focal length that we're all used to seeing, whether we know it or not. It's one of the most widely used for street photography. I would guess the 35 millimeter equivalent and the 50 millimeter equivalent are two of the most common for street photography. I don't know all the numbers. I'm sure a 24 millimeter or 28 millimeter equivalent have a lot of photos taken as well. But it seems like the 35 equivalent and the 50 equivalent are very, very common for street photography. So if you do shoot city or street scenes, that focal length is one check mark in the pros column of this lens. The other check marks, I would say, is the weather resistance aspect of it. If you live in a city with more rain or snow, I don't. It's mostly sunny all the time here, but still, it's nice to have that. The weather sealing is a check in the pros column. The overall sharpness is definitely a check in the pros column, and it's obviously no surprise that the color rendition is strong and that helps the image quality as well. It's not the pancake lens. I do have the pancake lens. I should have pulled that over, but it's not the pancake lens. But to be honest, I would choose this over that 27mm pancake lens every day of the week. The only thing that has over this one is the size, as far as packing it in a small compartment or whatnot. But I would choose this one over that one any day of the week. If you ask me to choose this over the 35 f2, that's a tough choice for me because I still love that 50mm equivalent. I think I'm still getting used to this lens in terms of it's still growing on me completely. I mean, I've had a long history with that 50mm equivalent focal length, so it's going to take a little bit for me for that to completely pass that up. But those are the two lenses I would keep. If I'm only keeping two lenses, it's the 23 and the 35. And I really love how this feels on this camera. It also feels really well on my XH1 as well, of course. But it definitely has a nice weight and balance to it. And obviously the build quality of these lenses is fantastic for the price. You know, if you've used any of these, it's consistent. The aperture ring is super nice. And even the focus ring is still the same focusing system as the other ones, so it's not you know, like an old school manual focus lens, but the focusing ring is nice and large and it's easy to grip. So when you're doing manual focus with these lenses, it's really nice. Okay, I'm gonna roll some image samples and wrap this up. But before I do, we got to talk about the one big negative that everyone talks about when they review this lens. And I think it really turns a lot of people off when deciding whether to buy this lens or not. And that is, it has one glaring weak spot. And that is when you're completely wide open at f2 and you're focused at the closest focusing distance that the lens has. And I can't remember if it's 23 centimeters or 33 centimeters, but whatever it is, that weak spot is being wide open and focusing at the closest focusing distance. And I'll have an image sample that shows you what happens when you do that. And what happens basically is that it almost feels out of focus. It's very soft. Things have a halo around them, especially bright spots and whatnot. So it doesn't perform well in that specific shooting scenario. But if you take that one specific scenario away, it's a completely solid lens all the way around. And at every aperture, it's really solid. Even at f2, it's just the f2 at the closest distance is where you get that little oddity. It's kind of frustrating because it is such a well-rounded lens. What I wish Fujifilm would have done is just change the focusing distance just a little further, and then it would have managed people's expectations. But because it can supposedly register focus at a super close distance, people expect it to be sharp right there. And I kind of understand that because the 35mm f2 is solidly sharp, wide open, up close. What I would say is if you're getting this for street photography or city scenes, is just keep that in mind. And if you have a scene where you want to get really close, either get close and just back up, get as close as you can and back up a little bit, or get as close as you can and stop down to 2.8 or 4.0 and then adjust with your ISO or your shutter speed to make up for it. And then you're going to get a really sharp image. You're going to lose a little bit of the shallow depth of field and lose a little bit of the bokeh effect, but it's a trade-off. You're going to get a much sharper image. So I don't think that one flaw that everyone brings up, that everyone knows about this lens, is worth skipping it for that reason. Skip it because the focal length isn't for you. Skip it because you want something with a wider focal range, a wider aperture range. Skip it for those reasons. I think those are more valid than this because it is such a well-running performer otherwise. think if there's anything else with this lens that I didn't cover. I think, like I said, because there's so much information out there, I could regurgitate a lot of the stats and things like that. But I think, like I said, the best endorsement I can give this lens is I enjoy shooting with it in terms of how it feels on the camera, the manual focusing of it, how fast it focuses. And then, of course, when I get back and look at my images, I'm always impressed with the results. And it pairs nicely with my 35 f2. If I know for sure I'm going to need a little bit wider focal length, I'll grab the 23. If I know, for example, if I know there's going to be some scenes where I want a lot of up close and wide open, then I'll grab the 35 over this one. There's a little bit of a trade-off there, but I love this 23mm f2.0. I really can't say enough great things about it. It's a great lens in a great lineup. I have no complaints about these lenses. I am excited to see what they do with the Mark II versions of these lenses once they start updating each one of them. It could be a while before we see that, but so I guess that's it for now. Let me know if you guys have any questions about this lens. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos, of course, on all this stuff, so I'll revisit this lens along with the other lenses in one form or another. I gotta get the 50mm 2.0 to check that off my list at some point. So when I get that, I'll revisit all these lenses and talk about them some more. I still have to do a complete review of the 27mm 2.8 pancake lens, the weather-resistant one, the new one that came out this year. So I'll do that as soon as possible. But other than that, let me know if you guys have any questions. And just like always, I appreciate every one of you. You guys have been awesome, and I'll talk to you soon.